Are you interested in finding out what it takes to lead during difficult times and find maybe a new business stream during a time when most event organizers, especially in the trade show space, struggle to stay afloat? If you are curious, as well as what are some of the qualities of a great leader, stay tuned because I have an amazing guest that I can't wait to introduce and have a conversation about leadership and events and virtual hybrid production, trade shows, and everything in between.
Welcome to Events Demystified podcast, where we explore and demystify the world of in-person, virtual, hybrid event AV production and technology by sharing insightful tips, tricks and tactics to make your events a success. This podcast is brought to you by Trifan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency. And your host is Anca Trifan, a technical event planner and producer with almost 2 decades of hands-on technical experience in event production.
Today's episode is sponsored by Trifan Events, a woman-owned boutique production agency. And I'm your host, Anca Trifan, with a different voice than what you normally are used to hearing. So you're going to have to put up with this version of Anca being congested and sick. With me on the show today, I have Nick, the CEO of IBL Events, one of the Idaho's largest producers of trade shows, conferences, and virtual events. Nick's passion for helping individuals and companies grow is what fuels his passion. Nick is a results-oriented, decisive leader with proven success in new market identification, tactical and strategic planning, and leading diverse cross-functional teams. Over the past 20 years, Nick has had the privilege of being involved in multiple startups, working for the government, being an adjunct professor, which I didn't even know, for Boise State University, and working for a Fortune 500 company, Micron Technology. He was born and raised in Idaho and considers Idaho one of the greatest places to live. No wonder that everybody moves into Idaho. He even convinced his wife, who is from Alabama, that the Northwest would always be home. In his spare time, Nick enjoys spending his time with his family, collecting cards, and occasionally getting in a round of golf. Find out more about Nick, his education background, and current events that he's working on in the episode notes. And now, without further ado, let's welcome Nick in. Welcome to the show, Nick. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you, Anca.
I hope you're not anywhere close to as congested as I am. You sound normal to me, so I think you're good.
Well, this is the benefits of being in the virtual world, so we're safe and sound.
That's right. I cannot send over the airways nothing that I'm dealing with right now, and nor that you would ever want to. So we're good. Hey, you know what I was thinking? I think it's been exactly 2 years since I had your beautiful wife, Anna Marie, the co-founder of IBL Events, join me on the air. And we were actually doing this live in this office. And that was right before the onset of the pandemic. Yet we had this like uncertainty on the horizon, not knowing what it was going to be like. And we were talking about like what we're going to do, with our trade shows and how you're going to implement some measures like health measures and all of that. It's so crazy to, fast forward 2 years later and realize that, man, did we have no idea what we're going to deal with?
We really didn't have any idea. And, I think you and I even talked about it. We thought it was going to last just a few months. We're going to be back at it. And then lo and behold, here we are 2 years later, and it's becoming part of our lives. But luckily enough, all have that entrepreneurial spirit. Sometimes when our back's against the wall, we kind of figure out a way to survive. And I think that's I guess if there's silver lining in any of it, that's probably the good thing that came out of it.
I love that you segue into that because that's exactly what I want to kick us off with. Would you give our audience maybe an overview of the transformation transformation that you needed to go through and you needed to take the company during this 2-year pandemic that it's now never ending, sounds like, and the role that having an open mindset played to lead during such a difficult time, and some of the strategies that you employed to overcome, what was happening in your world.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating story. And I know we all have our own stories regarding the pandemic and how it affected us. But we actually did see it coming. And somewhere in that January time period, we started talking about it as a team. I remember having our team meeting saying, hey, team, there's this weird thing out there that's happening over in China. It's getting a lot of press. And it was weird. We just talked about it, but no action was taken. Then in February, I remember distinctly calling a team meeting saying, we need to plan a contingency in case something happens to our events, because it started to speed up. That was probably the best thing we did in terms of just being prepared. But it was hard because we didn't know. And we didn't know the extent, but we at least had a backup plan. And
I don't think at the time you were actually foreseeing all the cancellations that were going to happen.
No, not at all. And honestly, we were planning just a cancellation of one event at the time. And then fast forward to March, and we realized in the middle of March, we were going to have to cancel our first event. And again, I would say from our standpoint, the best thing we could do for our team was to communicate. And, we also had a stay-at-home order here in Idaho, and we sent everyone home and said we were just going to communicate every day with them. And we were going to start planning for the next event. And while we worked through the cancellations and all that stuff, and we just communicated with the team. And lo and behold, the cancellations kept coming, pandemic, which we're all familiar with. However, what we ended up doing was just planning for the summer. And during that time, meaning we're going to reschedule and have events during the summer. But what we found out was during that period, we started getting a lot of calls for doing virtual events. And we initially said no, because that was not our strength, that we were really strong in this trade show space. And we were initially turning away business. But at that time, we talked as a team and we realized we probably need to see and think about this other venture. And so we said yes. And that was the next step in this journey for IBL Events.
So what did you feel like it was one of the maybe hardest obstacle or limitation to overcome in this journey of basically embarking on a completely different new road? It's not something that you have done as a company before.
Yeah, and honestly, our biggest obstacle was own mindset, specifically maybe my mindset, where I thought we maybe couldn't do it because we didn't have experience like a lot of other people. But what I realized was we needed that extra push because of COVID to go into this space, and we were actually exceptional at it. We have some of the best people on our team, and we were fully capable if we put our minds to it. We had to do a lot of training and resources to be good, but we had the pieces already in place. We just didn't realize it. So I would say the biggest obstacle is really our own mindset, because sometimes in life we put up a wall, and that false wall is doubt. And we sometimes doubt ourselves without even trying. And again, sometimes we need to push through it. And I needed a kick. Unfortunately, it had to be COVID, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because we found we were really, really good at doing some other things.
That's awesome. Now, since we are sort of already talking about virtual events and pivoting, we haven't used that word enough.
And by the way, I heard a good one on pivoting, and I heard a speaker say the reason why they don't like using the word pivot, and it makes sense, is if you put your foot down and you truly pivot, you will always end up at the same spot. So we need to break down.
It's a 360
like turn, right? That was really, I really like that analogy. So
I call it swiveling because I feel like sometimes we're like, we've been swiveling back and forth. Like the direction was like, oh yeah, we're going this way. Oh no, actually we're turning around and we're going this way. But anyway, getting back to the topic here, as we both experience with the virtual events, I guess one of the silver linings of that has been, aside from reach, larger reach and accessibility, was the data analytics and metrics. And I know that you're a little bit passionate about that. I know why, because you're a businessman, you're a numbers guy. So you're like that, kind of lights my soul on fire type of thing. How has data collection and metrics help organizations in your market increase their next event's ROI and influence maybe the direction of the events that follow post that?
Yeah, and it's absolutely critical for us. I can't emphasize that enough. Tracking data is so important, our KPIs and what we do. And the reason why we do it is, for one thing, is it just helps us increase that probability of success. And companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, sometimes we don't have the luxury to, like the big corporations do, in terms of tracking data. But I would ask the listeners out there, especially business owners, just start tracking some of the key metrics within your business, whether it's financial related or performance related. And you'd be amazed at how that helps the decision-making process. And what we're looking for is, again, helping us point ourselves in a direction, but more importantly, giving us just a higher bit of probability for success. And some of the data that we get back, we realize it's maybe not good data. It doesn't tell us a whole lot. And so we stop tracking. But over time, we've really been able to track really good data to help us. And that's with customer experiences. It's with our vendors, with ourselves from a performance standpoint, our marketing efforts, and the list goes on. But we just had to start somewhere, and we had to just start collecting that data. And over time, that data gets better and better because you have more data points. So it's just been absolutely critical for our business. And I give a lot of our success because it helps make decision-making process a little easier. So it's absolutely been critical.
So that's from a business point of view, internally, as you were mentioning. However, for an organizer's point of view, what would be then some KPIs that they should focus on, and maybe some that there's not as important, like you mentioned, and worthy of keeping records for?
Yeah, from an event organizer, event producer standpoint, the customer experience. Sometimes we get wrapped up into our own worlds because we're experts in it, but we don't want to lose sight of what the customer is feeling. And this has been a perfect example during the COVID experience. Is time management's become more important to people than ever. And they want to understand, what is that experience that they're going to feel at a show, at a conference, at a virtual event. We have, as event producers, we have to convey that. And we also have to track that response, right? Because if we lose touch of what that customer experience is, we may be doing a lot of things that we think are good because we're in the business, but it's not translating to the customer. And our customer experience and what they're going through is changing rapidly, right? In what they want, and what they want to hear, and what they want to see, and what they want to experience. And we have to keep a pulse on that.
So what are some of the predominant event trends, if you want to call that, beginning of the year-ish, technologically or not, that you see emerging this year, both, in our local market, event market, but also maybe at a national event level based on the type of events that you've been involved with so far?
Well, I think, and this is no surprise, I think obviously in a hybrid, when you talk hybrid, having the recordings now be available at events it's just happening almost in every single event. We have a recording of some point. It might not be live streamed, but it's being recorded and then it's being broadcasted out after the event, especially in that conference space. So that's been one change that, it used to be either or, and now it's always part of the experience. And
so
then,
broadcasted at a later time. So we're talking about kind of like two different timelines. It's like a synchronous moment of like you have the in-person or virtual experience, but then what the virtual audience might get is not necessarily as it's happening, but more on a later on demand, more curated version of the actual event, correct?
Correct. That's exactly right. And event producers, as you're probably well aware of, and especially your listeners, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to extend that brand beyond just that date of the live event. It's extending that. And so we're seeing a really creative ways of, whether it's through a paywall or slow playing seminars over a course of a period of time afterwards, or even before. I've seen, as now that we're in a couple years into this, some of those are being released before the next year's event as hype, as you would say, for
teasers and
yes, exactly, teasers,
hype makers or what? Yeah,
that's right.
I love it.
And then one other thing we've seen is that it's really interesting is because of everyone's used to this technology. It's not something, almost everyone, even kids and older generations, almost everyone's now comfortable with like a Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meets. It's just there. But what we're seeing is a request for events that we used to not think of in terms of using a virtual component. So like a wedding, like a golf event where people are saying, hey, or even funerals.
I'm a big fan of actually funerals. I've streamed quite a few. And honestly, I just happen as a person, I believe that when you show up for someone at a funeral, then you really show up for someone because you embrace both the joy and the sorrow of the reality of life, right? And I've seen that increase so much more so than before because anybody that has lost someone can relate to the fact that it helps to have people around. Now, some of those people, you might not be able to have them in person anymore because, distance and health issues. But I've seen the impact that it has to actually stream it to an audience that wants to be there and wants to partake into that special moment, as hard as it is. A few of the events that I've done that were funerals, honestly, it just warmed my heart as much as it was painful to know that somebody died. We call it celebration of life. And that's what I think the most important thing of a funeral is, like, to celebrate that person's life and honor it, because everybody wants that type of respect, acknowledgement that their life mattered.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that contingency plan. We don't want someone to miss our wedding. We don't want someone to miss a funeral, but in this world, things happen. And having that in technology has been a blessing to allow us to be connected sometimes when we don't even want to be, but we have that opportunity or option. It's been very, very helpful. And that's what we're seeing is in these non-traditional event spaces, it's becoming a lot more popular.
And I see an openness in mindset, like you were touching on a little earlier in our conversation, where if we actually discuss the idea of having a virtual wedding beginning of the pandemic, or even the summer of 2020, I know lots of weddings that have canceled, and probably you're very much aware of that as well, because everybody was hoping, well, next year around this time, we're going to actually have an in-person wedding. And that didn't happen. And then 2 years into this, you're like, well, are we going to get married? We're not going to get married. Then what's the best option that we got?
Right.
Before we move any further, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our main sponsor, Trifan Events, which is a boutique event planning and production agency that will come alongside you, offering personalized event planning and technical support, strategic event design, production and technology management, and flawless execution for live, virtual, and hybrid events. The team at Trifan Events is passionate about planning and producing event experiences that get people involved with true moments of interaction, engagement, and co-creation, while offering white glove treatment throughout the entire planning process, enabling you to reach your event goals with the use of creativity, production tools, and event technology. Find out how Trifan Events can plan and produce your event become memorable. Go to trifanevents.com.
Okay, so I guess one of the biggest trends is that there's a lot of other events that could happen in a virtual or a hybrid format, maybe a smaller in-person gathering than with the reach of what the virtual event is able to produce. Anything else that's worth mentioning?
Yeah, and again, this is just our perspective from where we're at, but the trade show industry is probably the one aspect that has not moved forward from a technology standpoint because it's so hard. There is some solutions out there that, software solutions that try to do a virtual trade show, but it's still not the same. We're probably years away from a great customer experience. When we talk about this transition to the metaverse, I think augmented reality will help tremendously with that. We're still a little ways away from that, but the trade show industry, again, is probably one of the few that it's still this hands-on, tangible feeling connection where it really hasn't moved into this virtual space. And I don't see it happening quite as fast as everything else.
I can see that. I was just listening actually earlier today to a TED talk on digital fashion and how much the fashion industry is actually moving into this digital space with fashion through the tools of augmented reality. And obviously, we're talking about fashion designers with a lot of budget behind their brands and exploring new avenues to engage, especially the younger generation that they're already used to this digital world. And it was so fantastic. It was like a 5-minute, super quick overview of what that looks like, what a demand there is for it. And I was listening quite perplexed, honestly, because I love fashion shows. I come from a background of like in-person fashion shows and doing the production and lighting. And gosh, it's so, fabulous and grandiose and out there. But the idea of like having it as a metaverse universe completely separated from our reality, in which you can wear 3 outfits at once and just at the snap of a finger have, something else that you're wearing, but it's at a price that is super like high as well. I'm like, who would pay for such a like expensive digital outfit? Apparently lots of people just to present themselves in a, hey, here's what I'm wearing today, and just for that one picture worth the money. I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel a little behind right now.
Well, yeah, and I'm probably with you. I think I'll always be behind in that aspect because I don't see myself purchasing a digital outfit. However, I see, the appeal to some of that. But where I see really an impact from a business community standpoint is having that augmented reality. If you were picture you sitting in front of a mirror and being able to swipe and look at different outfits on you and then deciding that's the outfit I want. Or if you're buying a home and you want to look at the countertops or the fixtures and what they look like before they're actually installed. There's so many benefits to this augmented world or this metaverse that we're going to experience in the years to come. That's really going to transform our business world.
Nick, I can't wait to have this conversation 2 years later when we're going to touch base on this.
I can't wait. And I'll be wearing my digital uniform by then. You know it.
Yeah, probably switching about 5 outfits during the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I'll have a top hat and a mustache.
That's right. Well, here's the next segment, what I call the rapid fire segment. So I'm going to ask you a round of rapid questions. Answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. So you ready for it?
Here we go. Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. The perfect hybrid event is?
A conference.
Okay. What makes a virtual event iconic?
The experience to be able to communicate with a wider audience.
The most engaging hybrid event experience must have?
Breakout rooms.
The best all-in-one event platform that you've worked with is, and why?
StreamYard, because of Anca.
What is one piece of advice that you were given that you still follow today?
The only person that could hold you back is you.
I love it. And what is one thing that people often tend to get wrong about you?
That's actually a good one. You put me on the spot there. Yeah.
Can I tell you my perception?
Please help. Yeah, please help me on this.
But then you still have to answer for yourself, okay? So when I first actually met you, I thought that you're very introverted. For some reason, I just came across like, more reserved, introverted guy. And then I got to know you and you're like exactly the opposite. And I was like kind of surprised because I was like, there's a lot more than meets the eye with Nick.
Well, I appreciate that. And I love people and I love being around people. And I love that connection. There's nothing like being face-to-face and having a connection with someone once you start talking to them. And that's something that, I know the question was about me, but when I'm talking with other people and I meet someone else for the first time, it's amazing how we automatically sometimes judge a book by its cover. And I know that's a cliche phrase, but it's so true. We automatically put up a perception just by seeing somebody. But every time I talk and have a conversation with an individual, I'm blown away by what I hear. And usually my first impression is wrong with somebody, because I get to know them and I find out a story that just blows me away. And maybe that's how your experience is with me, right? Thinking of me as an introvert. But I will tell you, with that being said, is as much as I love people, I found that I do like that time to myself. And I think that is also really, really important, time with my family. And that's become more and more precious to me. Us being in the events business, we're in the people business and we love putting on awesome events and great events. But at the end of the day, when we come home, having that time, just being by ourselves, there's nothing better. So
you would say that one thing that maybe people get wrong about you is the fact that they think you're just like a business guy and always going, for it 100 miles an hour to get the event done and executed and produced. But at the end of the day, really where your heart is at home with your 2 beautiful boys and your wife, and it's like just having a quiet moment with the family.
That's right. And I'm a business person, just like yourself. We work extremely hard. And I love that. That's something that doesn't drive me crazy. Like people, you work too much. But I will tell you that there is a balance, right? And we do have to find that balance. And it's not always easy, especially being a business owner. And you still have to find that. And I think that sometimes that's not easy to do. And it's a struggle. But I try to do that.
I love that. Two things from what you were just saying. One, the perception that sometimes we make about people just on the first impression. I think what the magic happens and where you move past that is when you're willing to accept that that one first time perception that you made might not be the correct one. And I think that takes some type of a growth mindset, a type of mentality that you don't just put people in their little, containers and then they stay there forever, because it would be so unfair to treat people like that. If you didn't get a chance to meet them and actually realize, oh, that impression that I made, about Nick is actually so wrong, because I love how friendly and presentable and approachable Nick is once you get to know him, right? Sometimes the same way, like on flip side is where like I can come across, very confident and very threatening sometimes, right? And I'm like, well, if you really know me, you realize that I'm actually such a goofy person that I just love laughing and I love to have fun. So I love when people are able to admit to themselves, I have made a wrong, assumption, and I'm willing to change it. I'm willing to actually open my horizon. And then the second thing, this idea of life, work, balance, I like to call it integration, because I'm still to find a balance somehow. I'm not sure how well I'm doing on that, because I feel like if I were to grade myself, I'm kind of like always getting like a failing grade. Because like you said, work is not work. Work is fun. Work is actually where I really love to spend my time in, and that's where I think the secret is. When work becomes fun, then maybe you're exactly where you need to be. That's your calling. I think probably a couple more questions that we're going to touch on as time is just going by, man. It's like just it won't be on our side ever. What is a event related lesson that the universe keeps putting in front of you, kind of like a recurring message that you really need to learn?
It's listening. I love to talk. There's no doubt about it.
See, that's why I was like, man, Nick actually is not an introvert.
Right. No, I love to talk, and I have the gift of gab, but there's so much room for improvement, but it's been something that I've really been trying to be more conscious about over time, is the power of listening. It's amazing what we could hear from people, whether they're having a good day or a bad day, is sometimes flipping and just asking, hey, how's it going? And listening to people in business, asking those questions, asking why, and listening. And it's amazing the power of what you'll get back. And I think that's something that, I keep having to remind myself, is I like to jump and start right away. It's not easy for me, but it's something that once I get back in that groove of listening, it's very powerful.
I will share with you though something really interesting. This podcast for me actually has been the greatest lesson in learning how to listen. As I've had a lot of, interviews and conversations, and also you have the little bit of the digital delay and you want to like jump right back, with your thoughts, and then you realize that actually you didn't hear what they said. It was one of the greatest lessons in listening and putting myself more in that position of patience and awareness that I need to work on this skill.
Well, you do an amazing job on this podcast and the show. And I'll tell you, this is where I would probably struggle if I was in your shoes, because I would like to respond right away. And you've done an awesome job today. But yeah, that's great.
I love it. Here in closing, as we're coming to a closing, what's one piece of advice that you have for other event professionals, small business owners that are seeking to better position themselves for success in the future of what the events might look like, both digital, in person, hybrid?
Don't be afraid for change. And I know that's cliche, but again, move forward. Like sometimes we get into analysis by paralysis, right? Where we try to overanalyze some of our decisions. And I think sometimes we need to move faster. And sometimes we don't have the luxury to make those decisions, but just move forward. Make good decisions, use that data, right, to help guide you into those. But sometimes it's better just to make that decision, move forward. And sometimes that means change, right? Getting out of our comfort zone. And, Anna Marie and I always say to ourselves, well, is it going to kill us, right? And, if that's, it's not going to, let's move forward. And more often than not, it's really been a good decision for us. Now, again, we're making calculated decisions, but we're moving forward. And sometimes we put up those, going back to our earlier conversations, we put up those barriers, self-doubt. Well, we can't do it. So we're not going to go down that path, right? It's amazing what we could do, but we sometimes have to get uncomfortable.
Well, that's amazing advice. I agree. Like, there is probably not a lot of growth happening if you're not out of your comfort zone. I like to do the constant comparison between my fitness journey right now, because I'm on this fitness journey into a bodybuilding competition. And it's funny to see how many lessons you get to learn while you're doing something outside of your comfort zone. And every time I'm, in my routine and doing my programming, there's like new things that I'm ruminating on and drawing parallels to business, to events. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like not only growth at a fitness level, but it's like growth at a mental adulting level, So I couldn't agree more. Like, you want to stretch yourself, you want to get out of the comfort zone. There's going to be some benefits that you're going to reap. Yeah, a little bit of, discomfort for sure, but also the benefits are totally worth it. So I appreciate all the time that you spent with me today, Nick, the insightful tips and tricks and advice and wisdom that you have shared with our audience. Where can our audience connect with you if they would like to learn more about what you do, your journey, and the impact that you're making in the community?
Well, if you want to connect with me personally, the only place you'll find me is on LinkedIn. I know it's horrible, but I'm not on any other social media platforms, but I am on LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect, Nick Aldinger, you'll find me on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about our company, IBLEvents.com, and you can see all the fun stuff we're doing, but those would be the two best places.
Any fun shows coming up worth mentioning?
Yeah, we have a big one, March 25th, 26th, and 27th. The Boise Flower and Garden Show is finally going to be back after, believe it or not, a 3-year hiatus. It's going to be back, and we're really excited about this one. It's going to be at the Boise Center here in Idaho, and we're really looking forward to a great event.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nick. Friends, this is it for today's episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with us. Tune in for our next episode that will be airing out soon. For now, have a wonderful rest of whatever day, night, evening it is that you're on your own time zone.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to review it, rate it, and share it with other event professionals that could benefit from it. Connect with us on social at Events Demystified Podcast. We would love to hear from you and what you're up to. If you'd like to learn more about Trifan Event services and find out if we're a good fit in supporting your event, can we help your event be successful with a 20-minute free consultation? Link in the episode's notes. Thanks for tuning in.